every single week we do our very best to help you, our church family, dive deeper into community, making sure that no one walks alone. Guys, guess what? It's the end of 2024, almost 2025. Welcome to the new year. How are we feeling?
We did it.
We did it. We made it. Yay! Another year down.
Do you guys find, like I do, that it's, as I get older, it gets harder and harder to keep track of? I mean, the time feels like it's speeding by at an alarming rate.
Absolutely. Feels like every year, it's harder for me to look back on like which year was what, like back in the 90s, I feel like I could track every year, early 2000s maybe, but now it's like, was that 22? Was that 21? Was that 2019? I mean, we had COVID to kind of separate the two, but even that is a blur. So, yeah.
Dusty, you got big New Year's plans? Did you guys do anything big for New Year's?
Not really. We take a break from all the Christmas festivities is what we do for New Year's. And we always end up somewhere different, except last year. I think last year we ended up doing like not much of anything, and it was the best thing ever. So we didn't have to go to a party. We didn't have to go do an event. So this year, I don't think we have New Year's plans. But, if somebody that's listening right now wants to give us an invite to something great, I'll give you a solid maybe.
This is going to come out on the 1st, so it feels a little...
Well, that was a swing and a miss, wasn't it?
What about you, Dave? Are you back from Worcester yet?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're just doing a few days up in Worcester, and and then that's it. So we have really no other plans. I'm surprised, Dusty, you're not doing a DJ thing for New Year's or something like that. You don't?
No, I've got one the week leading into New Year's, but not on New Year's.
Okay.
So a lot of people like to get married in December now, which is becoming very much a thing.
Yeah.
Which is just wonderful in all the ways.
No, Beth and I are pretty low key these days. We don't do a lot.
Yeah. Same for us. We usually get together with a couple of folks, but really low key. And honestly, midnight is so late for me. I just hurts my heart sometimes to stay up that late. Hey, listen, we're on the other side of Christmas Eve, and I'm 100% positive that we left it all on the field on Christmas Eve. But I thought it would be fun for us as a church staff to kind of talk a little bit about the planning and the preparation that goes into putting in to Christmas Eve, because I don't think a lot of people understand the amount of work that goes into a typical Sunday, let alone a Christmas Eve Sunday. So Dave, let's start with you. When you're talking about a message like Christmas Eve, what are you thinking about as you're writing and as you're delivering? What are kind of the constraints that you put on yourself?
Yeah, so we start the process probably back, I don't know, was it October that we kind of came up with the idea of a theme? So that's usually staff looks to me to kind of like, what do you want to talk on and preach on? And so I have to come up with a theme. Obviously, the constraints there is the Christmas message. So you're kind of working with the Christmas story, right? And so having done it for 17 years now, it's a bit of a challenge sometimes to try to come up with something fresh. I always wanted to come up with a fresh angle, but you're still working with the same story that everybody knows and can actually recite a lot of it from memory. So we come up with a theme, and then I'm always trying to think of like people like my neighbors who don't normally come to church, but I know they may show up. They have in the past, and they may show up again. So I'm having those kind of people in mind as far as have a little bit of religious background, may not be on a day-to-day walking with God in a way that we would, but maybe have some curiosity, interest still, and they're here, and they want to have something to take away from. So trying to think of them as far as what part of the story of Christmas would connect with them. Obviously, I still have the rest of our church family in mind who are walking with us every single week in, week out, and so I'm trying to find that balance of what's good for them to hear, like as far as neighbors or coworkers who are maybe not following Jesus at the moment, but there's opportunity, or obviously that it's potential there, but at the same time, those who are dedicated followers of Jesus who are doing this every day. So
How do you decide which text you're going to use?
That's a good question too. It just kind of depends on. It's so much of like where I feel like I'm at right now, and where our church is at. And so this year, with our rally cry being no one walks alone, I just really wanted to lean and press in more into that relational aspect. And so Christmas is all about the idea of withness and God with us. And so that kind of led me to the gift of with. So um, we're thinking in those kind of spheres for the next couple months from October to December.
Dusty, do you have a favorite version of the Christmas story?
Oh, no, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that before, to be honest with you. No, the Christmas story is the Christmas story.
I'm a big Luke guy. That's why I ask. I
All right.
prefer Luke's gospel for now. It's just the most. I think it's the most complete. I don't know. Dave,
Yeah.
you got a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, Luke's definitely, I feel like, more detailed. Matthew, starts out with the genealogies, which is good to helpful with kind of understanding where Jesus came from, and the fact that God used a lot of sinners and mistakers along the way to get us to Jesus. And so I think that's a great reminder that God can use anybody, anyhow, to accomplish His will, and He can use me. But yeah, I like Luke a lot. Definitely a lot more detail, so I appreciate that.
Now, how much do you work with the worship team on comparing the message to what else is being built around it? Dusty, why don't you take us through a little bit of that process when you kind of know where we're going, what's it look like, how you guys begin to build the service?
Yeah, so I love building services that are built around themes because it gives us a lot of creativity. So what we did this year is we kind of pulled somebody from each working genius letter into the room. So we haven't talked a ton about that, but we need a W, a wonder in the room. So I can bring some of that. We need an I in the room, which was the inventor, which Dave, you kind of carried that this year for us on that end. We need a tenacity person in the room to actually help us execute the things that need to be done. Which, a Hank and a Jen kind of sat in the room for that kind of stuff. So what we did is we took that concept and then we just started throwing out what we call ugly baby ideas. So the ugly baby is, hey, the idea doesn't have to be thought out. We just want big, bold ideas, whether we think we can pull them off or not, built around this theme of with. And then we just start throwing stuff on the board until something starts to come about. So this year we kind of end up building the service in 3 acts is kind of how we put it together. So act 1 was something that really incorporates the family and introduces the theme of with. So the way we did that this year is through a kids video and through a fun little, kind of kids Christmas song where we invited kids to come up and hang ornaments on the tree. And then the second phase kind of moves us more into the nostalgic Christmas, going a little more theological into who Jesus is with songs like O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. That gets us into the bumper video, which Pastor Dave built, which introduces, again, the gift of with and what that is. And then Dave takes it into the message, and then we build the response around that. And we know we always end with Silent Night, kind of by candlelight. So that's sort of how it came together this year.
And then on the other side of it, how do you feel about exactly what's going on? Like, I mean, how do you measure success on a service that's got so many soft edges? That question goes to both of you, but Dusty, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I would honestly say very differently than I would measure the success of of other services in the year, right? So like most of the time, what I'm looking for in a service order is I want it to be meaningful. We want it to be impactful. We want people to walk away with something meaningful and significant that really, makes them think. And hopefully we've allowed them to, authentically engage with God along the way with the songs that are there and with how the message is presented. Christmas Eve is a little different because the expectation is different. So, there's a reason you see a lot of churches do kind of these big pageantry, theatrical kind of things to retell the Christmas story, because the same challenge that Pastor Dave just mentioned a little bit ago, you're taking the same story every year. It comes about the same time of year. People really like the nostalgia of what the Christmas season brings. So it's one of the harder services, I think, to engage with in the same way that we would want people to engage any other Sunday out of the year, which is we want you to, really have that encounter with God. And I want them to have that at Christmas too. But it's as much about creating this experience that, does build on the nostalgia and also presents a meaningful message for hopefully people that are only in the room twice a year. The Creasters we talk about have something where they can experience who Jesus is and why they need Jesus in their life. But there's a lot of elements that we know we kind of do every year because we do rely a little bit more on that repetition and nostalgia.
Dave, what about you? How do you measure success on a message like that?
So there's two different questions, right? How do you measure success of like the preaching part, and then how do you measure success of just the experience overall? And they kind of go hand in hand, but I kind of measure things differently with those two things. But just with the sermon, it's really hard to measure. I don't know if I even try to do that much anymore. As less just the interaction, I guess, is the only thing I have to measure. I can't go back and go, well, what did you do with this, 5 weeks from now and collect data from it. But just the interaction with the people in that space with me, if I'm tracking with them, obviously, when people come up and say nice things afterwards, that's always nice and, great. But I don't know if I'm really hitting with people or not. It's just, you just kind of get it out there and hopefully God uses it and works with it. But I have no really way of measuring it beyond that. As far as the whole experience, I think what we're trying to create is an experience for people, atmosphere for people who don't normally come, who would maybe want to show up that next Sunday that we meet. That would be my hope and prayer. Like there'd be something that God does in their heart to say, you know what, I could use more of this in my life. I could use a little bit more community or more truth. They press in, they lean in the next time we meet together. So that would be a win for me.
Yeah, I think I fall in the same camp. I want to see, I think it has to be the right mix of nostalgic and also future leaning to kind of, in some ways it's a little bit like a first date, but it's a first date that a lot of people who are there have been on before. And so I want it to feel not scary first date-ish, but I want it to feel like exciting first date-ish. Does that make sense?
Does to me. I don't know about everybody else, but it does for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a weird service anyways, right? Because it's, when you think about the services you do throughout the year, it's one of the few services that I think the expectation is just so different for people, right? Because the expectation is much more like, I expect something creative and a little bit more theatrical, a little bit more out of the box. Maybe that's something that feels special that you maybe only do it once or twice a year. But it's low in participation. Typically, it's like people come to Christmas Eve services a lot of times to observe and to bring their families and to just get that whole feel. If we really want as a family to go somewhere, and it's like rewatching the Christmas Story, but in all these different ways. So it's just one of the hardest services to gauge success on. Other than, hey, we put together a really creative service. We feel like we really hit the importance of what the Christmas season actually is. But you get more visitors than almost any other time of the year. So there are people that aren't really a part of your church culture. So they don't participate the same way that your normal church folks do. So it's just an interesting, odd service every year that doesn't feel like any of the rest of them.
Yeah, it's a towing that line between what you were saying, like nostalgia and novelty. Like we want to feel those nostalgic feelings that we did growing up, but we also don't want what we had growing up completely, right? We want something a little bit fresh and a little bit new, something different, bring some energy that normally nostalgia doesn't bring. So finding that balance is a challenge, and especially like my preaching's like cut down, right? So I'm only doing 20 minutes versus 30 to 40 minutes. So I got to try to pack everything down into a simpler package, which is difficult when you're dealing with such big, important themes as the incarnation of Jesus and all that. So it's good. We're doing it.
We're doing it. It happens no matter what. Funny story. Growing up, we used to go to the late Christmas Eve service, like the one at 11, and it came after a party at my wife's grandparents' house. And so there were many a Christmas where several people in the church were already had partaken in libations. And so many, and that's the other part of the dynamic, right? Usually the Christmas Eve service for for families is like wedged in between a lot of different things. And oftentimes that leads to some really amazing memories. When I was, we used to do at my last church, we used to do like a 10 p.m. and that was in that same window. And my favorite thing was when the people would show up and they could barely stand up. Like you could just see them like they were swaying back and forth, not because of Silent Night, not because I was like, just don't set yourself on fire, you know?
Oh
So,
my gosh.
Yeah.
May the peace of the Lord be with you and also with you.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting day for us, right? So like we always travel at the end of Christmas Eve up to see my dad, and so we do Christmas with our family on Christmas Eve morning. So we wake up, do that, and then I gotta like switch gears to church mode by noon or so, and then it makes for a fun full day for sure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Good. Well, I don't want to just talk about Christmas. Christmas is already over. We're already thinking about next year's Christmas. Let's talk about the new year. New year, new you. Dusty, what kind of feelings do you have around the new year? Are you a goal setter? Are you one of those guys that puts it all together? You're writing stuff down, whiteboarding it. What are you doing? What's your
No. Sorry. I mean, no. The answer is no. No, I've got goals, but they're never centered. Like for me, it's just not the way my brain works. I don't center them around like, hey, January, it's a new year. We're going to do all the new things for the first time. Like I am hey, if the idea comes to me, I'm going to implement it right then and there and start moving forward with it, whether that happens in October or January or March. Like it plays into my impulsivity that I'm just not a planner like that. So, I don't look at January with anything other than, a little bit of a breather after Christmas is all done. And, I'll think through like, hey, what are things that I do want to do? So like this year I set on my calendar that I do want to, do the fasting on Wednesdays. And I think I wrote about that in a blog a few weeks back. So that's something I will start in January, just to get in the rhythm of it. But there's really nothing for me that January holds a special significance to, because like if I give you a motto in life, man, there's no time like the present. So when it comes in your head, go for it.
Dave, what about you, man?
Historically, I've been a pretty strong goal setter every year. This year, I have not put anything down on paper. It doesn't mean I don't have them in my head and I'm not working towards them. I just haven't articulated them so well yet for myself or others. But I probably will sit down at some point between, or probably have already sat down before the new year and written some goals. So as I'm talking, as people are listening, I probably will have some goals. For me, so I have categories, right? So personal goals, church goals, family goals, those kind of categories help me kind of just focus in on what's most important for a period of time, whether that's a year or just the first quarter or the first half of the year. We kind of separate some of those out as well. So, yeah, I like having a to-do list, as you guys know, as if you know me, I have a to-do list, and it's always adding, and I'm always taking things off of it. So I think the new year is nice in some ways, where some things, maybe like fasting, you wouldn't start normally during the Christmas season. It's not really a great time to do any sort of diet change until all the festivities are over, and then January kicks in. It's nice. So there's some good things about January being a slower month, that you can start a habit or break a habit a little easier than others.
Hey, I do want to say for the record, last year on that note, when I started doing my gym and fasting rotation, I started it in late November going into December, knowing that if I could do it throughout December, then the rest of the year was going to be way easier.
That's
And
great.
you crushed it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I did for a long time, and now I'm not crushing it as much anymore. So that's the goal. It needs to go back on the calendar again to get back in that routine. But yeah, for like a good 7 months, it was rocking.
That's awesome.
I tend to use a version of Scazzaro and John Mark Comer's Rule of Life stuff as a way to kind of set. And so I always take some time this time of year and review the Rule of Life. And then because I get nerdy about goals and plans in the work that I do, like I really like thinking about like I have my core 4 personal values, and then how do I evaluate if I've lived those values out? And so those activities, so that would be like the lead goal. And then the lag goal is like the activities that take us towards the lead goal. So faithful is one of the things on my core four. And so how do I know if I'm being faithful? I know I'm being faithful by, and then I can list off a couple of activities like, being a part of a worship community, dating my wife, those kind of things. Like there's a whole list of those things. And that's typically, I will typically sometime between October and February spend some time revamping that, usually in some version of a retreat or that sort of thing. And then I also do the same for my business there as well. And so, and that's a good exercise for me spiritually as well, because I trying to always make sure like I'm wrestling with the disciplines. I already know that there's a big reckoning coming. I had on my list this year to do an extended fast, which I successfully blew off.
Nice job. What's an extended fast look like?
5 days, usually just water is the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal. And I think I did like 2 days this year, which at this point in my life, 2 days doesn't feel like it. I'm comfortable with 2 days.
It's not
fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it's not like I'm like signing up for it, but like I really wanted to like stretch that a little bit, and I just blew it off. So,
what kind of work do you do looking back on last year's goals?
I'll evaluate it. So like I'll pull it up and say like, because eventually what I want to do is I want all of my core values, which are faithful, grateful, generous, and movement. Those are my 4 values. So I'll say, and so I want to be able to evaluate if I lived those values out, and did I do the tasks underneath them, right? And so how well did I do it? Like one of the values this year that I added was to call my dad more because of some stuff going on in his life, health wise. And so I'll be able to say, did I, and I put a certain number of days. I always try to get down to a number, because the problem with a guy like me is that I can talk myself in and out of a lot of success or failures, right? Like, it was an increase. It was probably fine. That's a win. When the reality is our good friend Tim O'Neill says, it's got to be yes or no. She's either pregnant or she's not, right? And that's kind of a crass example, but it's a good example of like yes or no. Like, did I do it? Yes. Or did I not do it? No.
Yeah. Dusty, do you look back on do you have a discipline of looking back and seeing how you did with your goals?
No, I mean, probably not as formally as I should have. Once again, I kind of live in the constant reevaluation of what I'm doing, kind of from day to day. Hey, is it working? Hey, is it not working? But like, I'm not a good. I don't live by that kind of yearly rhythm. I live just much more in that day to day rhythm or week to week rhythm. Really, my life is built around week to week rhythms, to be honest with you, because I've got a very set routine kind of every week in terms of what I do, which day of the week, and how it all operates. Just in this phase of my life, so not so much, but I feel like it lets me adapt a little bit quicker when I need to. It's like, hey, last week this was not working. I need to change this moving forward. How successful I do that all the time, I don't know. But yeah, maybe I need to get better in that. But no, probably not.
So here's a question. Is there a goal that you wouldn't mind sharing with our podcast audience that if they come and bump into you on a Sunday and ask you about it, that would be helpful for you?
I mean, I put the fasting one in there because I already made that one public to the church family. So
okay,
that's
so
the one.
How's it going?
Say that again. Sorry.
You would mind for people to ask you how it's going? Great.
No, you can't offend me for that. So yeah, ask away. It'd be good for me.
Good.
What about you, Dave?
I would say one of my goals is the whole idea of should is like I'm a right or wrong kind of guy, and I feel like I live in the land of like really this is a right thing or wrong thing, and that's how I just view things, and so then that leads to you should be doing this because it's the right thing, and I need to get away from that a lot more than I have ever been. So if you want to ask me about my should,
did you hear the way you said that? Even you put a judgment on yourself in that.
I know, right?
I need to get away from it. How about I want to, because I know it'll bring me more peace.
Great. Yep. See, I need. Yeah.
My counselor really hits me on that real hard. So.
Yep. So I want to do better with that. Yep. So feel free to ask me how my shoulds going.
Yeah, and for me, I would say one that has regularity to it is specifically solitude. Like for me, one of the things that I want to do more of this year is I want to spend more time in solitude in the morning. Oftentimes my mornings feel really rushed, and I'm really not in a position to get up any earlier. Like I get up at 5 usually. 95% of the time I get up at 5, and then I'm at the gym by 6. And then but then my the first appointment of my day usually starts at 7:30 or 8, and so it just goes real fast. I don't know how it feels so fast. And so I would just like a little bit more margin in my morning for if I want to spend 30 minutes in solitude, I'd like to be able to do that. So if people want to ask me how my solitude is going, that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah.
Dave, you never actually answered if you evaluate your goals. Did you notice that, Dusty? He was like copping out.
A little bit, but he's my
nice
boss.
To ask
So
the question, not have to answer it. And I was gonna say not as much as I should, but I can't use that word anymore, right? So not as much as I would like. How's that?
It's good.
Okay.
It's good.
Yeah. I'm a very forward thinker, like, future thinker. I don't like to look at the past as often because it really, to me, like we're moving ahead, but I know I need to do that better.
I would love to hear from everybody one prayer request that you have for the church this year. When you think about the church, all three of us are charged with shepherding this movement, what that means and looks like. I know we all take it very seriously. We love our church family. One prayer for the church as by itself, and then one prayer for you and the church specifically.
Well, I've been praying that starting with me, but for everybody, that that we would have a fresh kind of outpouring of God's Spirit in our life and sense of His presence and calling, and that God would just move in a fresh way here, that we would see His good hand and be like, that's God doing only what God can do. It's not because I got any better at public speaking or our music got better or, we got nicer at the door. It's because God did something only God can do. And I'd love to see more of that. And so just asking for God's presence, more of His presence.
And then for you and the church specifically?
For me, I think it would be the idea of being more present with people, with the idea of that we were talking about the gift of that I'd just be more present with my family, with the people I'm with at church, that I can just love just more tangibly than ever before. This, like, being curious about people and being open to just seeing what they need and what I can give them in that moment, of being helpful with people, just being more present.
Dust, you want to go next? Or you want me to?
Yeah, I think for the church, my prayer for the new year, like I've been feeling really good about 2025 and where our church can go, but
I know you've been optimistic every time I talked about it. Every time I've talked to you about it.
I know. And 2025 is the year, man. I'm just telling you. No, I think that if we as a church could be excited for what God could do instead of happy with where things are and just being complacent within that. I so much believe, just my own core theology, the root of everything I believe in is that, that God's got a future in store for us. And I always want to feel more optimistic about where God's taken us versus being able to look back and say, look what God did X amount of years ago. Wasn't that a good time? And it's like, man, as soon as we live there as a church, like we're dead in the water. Like we've got to believe that there's a better future ahead, and that, God is preparing his people for something awesome that we haven't even gotten a glimpse of yet. So like, that's the optimism I want to pray over our church and for our staff, and that, we're just at the beginning of what could be. I think for myself, I've been here in a regular staff role for, I don't know, I guess like a year and a half, 2 years-ish, maybe 2 years. Yeah, time flies, man. I don't even know anymore. But, I feel like I'm really, like, the people that have come in the church in the last 2 years, I feel like I'm kind of at level footing with. But there's a whole slew of people that have been around longer than that I've got to go back and still do catch-up work on in terms of building those relationships, backfilling them a little bit. So that's kind of my prayer for me, is that I'd have a little more time to backfill some of those relationships.
Yeah, my prayer for the church isn't that different than what you guys had already commented on. My prayer is that we activate a spirit of connection and connectedness, right? Connection with God and connectedness with each other. Like, I would love to see, more groups and more people engaged. And how do we get those people on the margins to lean in, right? I kind of talk about this idea like of the curious, committed, and core. And the core people are really active and they're really engaged. And the curious people are kind of just curious. And that committed group is, they would call, Grace their church home. But also they're not like super active. I would like for all of those things to move in. Like, so more people in the core, more people in the committed, more people in the curious. That's my prayer. Like, that movement part of it, which is super, super important. And then for me personally, it's very similar to Dust. There's a lot of people in the church that I don't know that I want to know. And so I pray for a spirit of invite in my heart, whether that be to lunch or to coffee or to home or at my home or somewhere else, right? I want to get to know more people. So if you're listening to this and we haven't connected yet and you don't feel like you know me very well, I want to get to know you so bad. So email me, Tony@CentervilleGrace.org, or Dusty. Email us both and say, hey, I want to get on your calendar. Let's get on each other's calendar. Let's make it happen. Let's do lunch. I want to know more people in the church. So those, I think, guys, I think that's a really good goals for all of us.
Let's get after it. I like it.
Closing thoughts. Anybody got any?
I would ask just the people who are listening. I would ask the people who are listening to start praying for those connections, that relationships flourish, and we thrive in 25. Like, I just pray that we ask God for the ability to thrive and give us the boldness and the courage and the strength and the grace to do whatever we need to root ourselves well into God so that we can thrive in this year.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that's our podcast for today. So thankful. Wait, did you have something else, Dusty? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. If you decide we're closing it, we're just closing it.
I thought you were done. Nobody was talking.
Well, you got to give us time, man. I mean, you're throwing us on the spot for these questions. No, I will throw in there. And boldly interrupt. I think that we would have the courage as a church to continue looking forward to the future. It's similar to what we just said, but to be courageous enough to say, hey, the past is the past, but the future is we want to be the people that God wants us to be. And what's that look like over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And like that should absolutely galvanize us as a people. So let's do it.
Yeah. A revival of disciple making. That's one of my prayers all the time.
Yep.
Can I close this now, or anybody else have anything?
You may now close. Good.
Hey, I can't. I'm just talking. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this incredible journey of podcasting as we finish up 2024 and head into 2025. As always, if you need anything from us, We're easy to find. We would love to connect with you. Thank you for all that you do. And remember, it's really important to us that you know